All right, we're underway. Welcome to the next Dev Diary update. So the big change this time is that we've now got all the DNOs added in to the sector architecture tracker. Last time we already had national grid distribution, but now Electricity Northwest, UK Power Networks, SSEN, and Scottish Power, all of their digitalisation strategies have been added in. I will first of all just show you the same sort of content is available as you'll have known from previously. So I can click into here. I've done, for example, Electricity Northwest, and you can have a look at all the different types of contributions they're making to the capability architecture. Click away at your leisure and learn about what they're doing and what the capability is that they're doing it to, and what level of performance and so on, well, not performance, but the level of depth of contribution. You can go and look through the different sections as represented from their document. Say, for example, digital grid's a good one to look at. And we can have a look at all the capabilities, maybe just get rid of the ones that aren't related to this topic. And as ever, I'll just say very briefly, you can pop to their document itself, and here's the digital grid section, see what was analyzed to learn how it's contribution to the architecture. Yeah, the architecture, again, you can drill right in and get the detailed narrative of how things are performing. There's a couple of additions in here that have been applied not only to the new sources, but to the old as well. So this is information that just wasn't really surfaced before. There's a bit about a boundary check, which is for cases where the aggregate score is on the cusp, maybe 2 or a 3 or a 1 or a 2, 3 or a 4. And it just gives some commentary on whether it was near the boundary and what was done. And then there's additional content about reasoning, which maybe still needs a bit of rationalization in time. There's a bit of overlap between the two, but there's just extra reasoning for why the scores are what they are. So you've got that for Electricity Northwest. If you want to know what they're doing or not doing, you can go and have a look there. You can do the same for UK Power Networks and have a look at their kind of color chart of what things they are or are not doing in their strategy against the capability architecture. And the same goes for SSEN here, and lastly for SPEN as well. So there we go. So we've got them all individually. I can go in our main home sort of home diagram where you see all the sources together. And in here, it mostly looks the same, but now not only can you see those new sources, you can also see the same diagram and look through it. But you can also now select on all networks, which at the moment is just the DNOs and it's just the digitalization strategies. But having done this, I can now see what the collective coverage is across the different network companies. And I'm just going to pick on one of them by no accident. I'm going to go on to ecosystem architecture. So across the energy sector, is there a clear architectural plan for what will be delivered? And you can look at, again, what the definition of ecosystem architecture is in full, if you wish to. You can see here a breakdown. So overall, the networks, the DNOs at the moment are doing relevant work to that, and relevant. Yeah, that does feel okay. You would expect the ecosystem architecture to be more centrally managed than the DNOs, although they should be making strong, relevant contributions. But you can see that not everything is a 2, right? So in some parts of the description of the ecosystem architecture capability, the scope of it being met and the typical outputs you'd expect, they're lower scores. We'll come back to that later. But you can then have a look through and see which networks have got more or less to say about that topic and what their individual scores are and why they've got those scores and such. And again, you can, as ever, so we talked about digital grid earlier, we can drill into digital grid and go right back to where we were a few moments ago. So I will now switch away from networks to all sources, and look at that. Ecosystem architecture is now green, and you can have a look and you can see the explanation at the top, and you'll see lots of mentions of the DESNZ digitalization framework, because that, of course, provides a lot of information about the plans for the ecosystem architecture. This is another change, an improvement. I'm doing a slightly improved job now of making citations a bit clearer in these rationales, so you can see where things are being pulled from. Of course, you've still got the full list down below of all of the different reasonings that get you to the score and what's being done about it. Again, it's there's a mix here of 3s and 2s in the different components that make up the capability. But overall, on this occasion, 3 wins out. Uh, Now, I think I'll stick with networks. So I think a thing that stands out to me, if I just select them again, and I might actually just get rid of the reds and the oranges and just stick with the 2, 3s, and 4 scores. And what really stands out, I find, when I've got it like this, is that you can see that data preparation, yeah, 3s across the board. That's nice to see, and it feels right that data preparation is an area where the DNOs are performing and doing leading work. They are, after all, right at the start of a lot of data's supply chain, all the network data. They are monopolies as well over that data, and therefore there's an expectation and a need for them to be doing high quality data preparation work. And that's what things like data best practice in the background are encouraging. And it's really good to see that that now shows up in the digitalization strategies that leading work's getting on. We can look at each of those and hear about why. And you will find there are some occasions where one network or a couple here, you spend and then get have got a couple of 3 scores that are really perhaps carrying the flag for it, but the others are doing relevant work. And then if you click into the next one, you might find you go ENW and NGED this time, and it's a different mix each occasion. That's interesting. It's good to see that it's happening at all. It may be that only some networks are doing some areas, but if it's happening in one place, it's not going to take long before it spreads to others, versus if nobody's doing it at all, right? So it's good that leading work is taking place, developing that. There's arguably a bit of a gap around security management. You can see that some of them don't have any 1 or 2, sorry, 2 or 3, 4 scores. I think they probably come up as 1s. Yeah, there they are. They're just filtered out. Um, I'm not saying that the DNO should be, leading or comprehensively delivering the security center for the sector, but I would expect to see relevant contributions probably across the board in this section. Maybe it just shows up in other documents. Maybe it's not in the digitalization strategies, but even then, you might expect to see some comfort that some of the work, for security is integrated with those digitalization strategies. But perhaps it will show up when more work is looked at. And you see more of a patchwork elsewhere, and you have to look at things maybe more case by case as to where you'd expect to see things. It's perhaps a bit different at the applications layer. So here I would expect DNOs to be doing lots of things. They're very interested in the applications of data and not data for its own sake. It's only people like me who are very keen on the abstracted capability of making data available to any given person on any given day and all that business. So you'd expect to see them doing lots of applications, and hence you do get quite a lot of leading work taking place. It's worth saying that this top layer of the architecture is really just a list of examples. There are loads of applications of data, and they're not all listed on here. And so I expect there are many things happening in those digitalization strategies that don't have a natural home in this architecture as it stands. And it's low priority to me, but in principle, I would want to extend the applications layer to cover all the different type of applications for data, and then you get better scoring about what the DNOs are contributing to. But it was really there just to make things a bit more real to people, this layer, so they can see what it's all for. But personally, my main interests are all of the other layers underneath it, or around it in the case of oversight. And there are other areas. So if we look further down, maybe you'd expect some leading work from the DNOs on the production of the common data marts, because again, they're upstream data monopolies that others need to depend on to do their analysis. And maybe the open data portals are helping in that front, but there are things that a common data mart expects that certainly don't show up in the digitalization strategy narratives, at least to the extent that it would be scored as leading rather than just relevant work. You might not expect as much on things like data science services and things which maybe the market would provide more rather than the regulated monopolies. It's a bit more of a middle ground where I think with engineering services, lifecycle management, shared knowledge base, they're things where maybe relevant work at level 2 is fine for a network. Maybe that's just fine. Perhaps you could do a bit more on engineering as again, they're upstream in the supply chain. And then you get again a kind of peppering across the data and digital layers as technical components. It's good to see that lexicon and taxonomy is getting a strong score. You would expect some leading work, not comprehensive, but leading work to be done by networks to be ensuring they're all using common and recognizable and explained language to the marketplace. So that's good to see. And similarly, they've got, in some cases, certainly with the DNOs, should be having versions of the sim expanded and such that work for distribution level or some equivalents to this. And so you'd expect leading developments to be planned. And that's actually, here I am in the middle of a narrative, but it's a worthy reminder that all of these scorings are based on what people, it takes on good faith that this is what people say they are going to do. It would be a separate set of analysis to say, are they actually doing these things? So all of these scores are just saying they're setting out to do the following, which is a good starting point. So it's good that they're setting out to make sure there's good data standards in place. It's good that they're doing electron taxonomy efforts, right? And then it's a separate assessment. So is it actually being delivered? Which is, I guess, a regulator's problem, for instance. But there are others where things aren't showing up at level 2 where you might expect it, like ontology management. That's another thing that might need a coordinated effort and so on. Be more forgiving on things like matching and linking and permissions data, because for networks, DNOs and such, that's maybe not as high up their priorities list, given the type of data that they tend to have available to them. So there is a mixed bag. I can't go through everything. I'll be here all day. But there's now the important thing is that it's now possible to choose a topic and then have a look and see what people are doing. So if you're interested in that topic, you know what the people around you are doing. And now we've got that set for DNO. I know obviously have to keep going further. Point of interest, so digitalization strategies, scores a 2 on the DNOs. But just because this is called digitalization strategy, that's not the same. This is I'm conscious that the DNOs themselves, I'm assessing their, go to back here, digitalization strategy. So you shouldn't automatically be expecting that to be a 4. This is the digitalization strategy for the whole sector, which goes beyond the DNO's remit. So the fact that they're doing relevant work to digitalization strategies is probably pretty good. Maybe there's some areas they could lead on, but they are somewhat beholden to the wider government's desires when it comes to the sector's digitalization. So maybe they shouldn't be scoring top marks in this area, but I pick it out because then when I switch over to all sources, you can see that the digitalization strategy is scoring a 4. Now, anyone who's watched previous videos will know that this was a 4 in my first, it down to a 3 in the second release, now it's back to a 4 again. It's been on the edge between a score of a 3 and a 4. If I just for a moment just pick on DNOs only, you see it comes out as a 3, and it's actually the combination of DNOs' efforts and the support shown through networks in their narratives that when you look at all sources, gets you up to a 4 for this score. I think it's still only just about a 4, and I say that because when I open up the capability I can see 3s on individual areas and I still see a 2 on the outputs, and yet the scoring is rounded up, if you like. It's not really rounding but analyzed up and said on aggregate this is still pretty comprehensive. Comprehensive doesn't have to mean 100% perfect, it just means it's pretty covered. So the intentions have pretty good coverage. And then you can see it really show up as I look at the source items, right? Lots of DNO stuff at the top with the higher scores, and then the networks work chipping in as well. So that, and it's a long set of sort of areas that are talking about this topic area, different levels of relevance. Obviously, it gets a bit shorter if I pull out the lower stuff, and just you can see the real top level bit is just coming from DNOs itself. So it's nice to see a 4 back on the table. It's good that it's not impossible to hit 4. It's very doable if you're doing all the right things, and it gives me confidence around the scoring mechanism. And you can see the network starting to contribute to this. So of course, DNOs aren't all networks, so they're one type, electricity distribution networks, to be proper about it. We've still got electricity transmission, we've got gas transmission, we've got gas distribution. It's also a bit more about the system operator as well, which is a sort of different type of network company or organization these days. So networks need to grow. This is just the DNOs, and there are other sources to analyze as well. It's a worthy statement that so far you'll see these say digitalization strategy, but anyone who knows the regulations will know that the overall regulatory guidance is digitalization strategy and action plan. Action plans have not been analyzed here. That's another effort, another day. The action plans, because by their nature, would probably go further. If I pop back to ecosystem architecture, they'd probably go further to helping with things like the typical outputs, or one would hope so anyway. Let me just select the networks only, actually. There we go, the typical outputs, because it's getting down into the more granular detail where the digitalization strategies have a tendency to talk about intent. And so they tend to score better on the purpose and what it's setting out to do and its scope, but they struggle a bit on outputs. So yeah, some of these scores for the networks, even just within their digitalization strategy and action plan, will get better when the action plans get added in, because they change more frequently and they tend to be transient. So you might want to look at the whole archive of action plans. That moves me into some of the headaches of this work. I guess I'll give a bit of back end stuff, that things that run through my mind that most people using this wouldn't care about. But you do have to really start thinking. If I go back to the homepage and I pick out these documents, um, if you just take a glance at them, what you'll see is that all of them are very beautiful, right? They're all very glossy and such, and that has its place and it's good for people who want to have a sit and a nice read. It's not good when you're trying to run automated processes and this is the only source of data you've got to run through. So there's a big overhead at the moment of the ingestion steps of getting the data into an analyzable state. And it's better and worse with different documents, and that will be influencing the scoring, because if the information is too hard to extract in an automated way, it's also unreasonable to expect the world around you to read all your document with a fine-tooth comb to the standard that would be done if it was machine readable. There's too many documents in the world to do that now. So this is my cool encouragement for documents that have traditionally been PDFs to think first about how they can be machine readable, and then to produce this one. It doesn't work so well because you have to download it. So I can look at all the others. Yeah, think about how they can be machine readable and then produce the human readable version on top, rather than only producing the human readable version. And actually, what I'm asking for here is essentially a part of the data best practice expectations, right? Make your data easy to consume by its users, which today is me. But I'm sure there are other people feeling the same pain as well. Uh, so yeah, that's a tour through the latest update. We're starting to get a bit of shape, right? We've got some of the basic government documents. We've got a core set of network documents. So what next? Well, I'm probably going to just add another batch of sources in. I could take different routes for that. It might be that I go and add in more network strategies, because we've done DNOs, but as I mentioned earlier, there's a few different types of networks. We could add them in. It might be that we go and do code bodies. Code bodies have got quite a role to play in the data ecosystem of the energy sector. So perhaps we could start doing them to see what they contribute. Of course, there's more government documents as well. I'm conscious that an obvious one is the sector digitalization plan. So I will just call out and say that I'm sure I have heard that it's going to get updated sometime soon. And on the basis that it's going to get updated, I've decided to deprioritize it. So I only have to analyze it once. It just saves a bit of time. So we'll put that on the back burner for a moment. So there we go. That is update number 3. And please peruse, enjoy. If you've got opinions, I will be very glad to hear them. If you've got things that you'd like to see added next, then I'm always open-minded to hearing about it. Thank you for listening.